Okay, welcome everybody to this week's Rising Tide Foundation lecture. And I think that today's presentation is very timely. We're entering the end of a very turbulent 2024, and we're going into what looks to be an even more turbulent 2025. A couple of weeks ago, we had Philip Collins, who gave a presentation dealing with the underlying hidden hand behind UFO psyops and the deeper Gnostic underpinnings, the cosmology underlying this crafting of a new world religion, which is being revived. Uh, Today, I think everyone's noticed there's a massive onslaught in the mainstream press currently to get us to think not about the danger of World War III breaking out in a variety of trigger hotspots that have been peppered around the world. Obviously, there's huge dangers across the Middle East on a variety of points. I don't have to go through. I think everyone is pretty adept. There's an accelerated push to prepare the groundwork for a war with China. There is obviously the efforts to break apart Russia in some weird ambition to balkanize the entirety of Russia and subdue it under some form of hegemony. Did not disappear. It's still in play and moving faster. And we have a new president coming in 2025 who may offer a solid opportunity to at least get some good conversations and diplomacy to put out some of these fires. So there's a lot of effort to sabotage this in a similar way that we saw the efforts by John Foster Dulles, Lyman Lemnitzer, over 65 years ago, working to sabotage the incoming president of JFK by enmeshing the United States into unmanageable forever wars, whether in East Asia or whether in Cuba or directly head on against Russia. There was a variety of things then that have a lot of importance as far as factors that were never dealt with over the past 60 years after JFK was murdered that have only gotten more powerful, more belligerent, more dangerous over 60 years. And of course, people are not thinking about solving these problems nearly enough. And why? There's a lot of distractions on the one hand, and there's obviously amongst those increasing array of distractions, UFOs, UAPs, as they call them, have been peppered in the mainstream media across the board. Alt media is buying into this as well, that the aliens are here now. They're finally engaging. It's disclosure time, the time we've all been told to wait for, when the truth will set us all free. Catharsis. Uh, no, Phil and his brother Paul have co-written some incredible works over the past years. I've had the pleasure of reading them. Cynthia's read them, and we've been publishing them. And I think that their work is very timely now, especially to situate what are these hidden hands, what are these manipulative psyops behind these operations. And so I'm looking forward. I got my notebook out. Paul, Paul, it says Philip Collins under your name right now, but that can be corrected later on. No big deal. No confusion there.
Yeah,
Um, I got my notebook out, and we're gonna learn a lot today. And then, like usual, after Paul's remarks are done, we'll have an open dialogue. So just put your hand up or put your name in the chat box, and I'll call upon you accordingly. So it's all yours.
gotcha. Well, those who study UFOs as a terrestrial-based deception almost always recognize one thing, and that's that the UFO deception campaign is characterized by function stacking. And function stacking is a term that appears to have been coined by the permaculture community, but it has application when we're looking at UFOs. It has been defined as an element in an operation that serves multiple functions. And UFOs do just that. They serve multiple functions. And so far as we could tell, there are three functions that UFOs serve. There were three functions, at least, that we looked at in our work. The first being that they concealed the test of experimental aircraft and other covert technologies. The second being that they help conceal criminal intelligence operations such as drug trafficking, gun running, sexual entrapment, blackmail rings, eugenics campaigns, regime change, etc., by leading researchers down this kind of evidentiary cul-de-sac. They just go around and around circles looking at the more sensational disinformation that's thrown out there. Three, And the third and the most significant of the functions is they advance social engineering and the radical reconfiguration of civilization. Most, if not all, UFO deceptions serve the third function. They may have been concocted to serve one of the first two, or both, but they eventually are employed to condition humanity to make a radical break from the past. Social engineering involving UFOs appears to have become extremely significant. First in the late 1940s. It may have very well taken place in years prior, but the final years of the 1940s seems to be when it became most prominent. At that time, a prior incarnation of what we call the beyond, which is basically a crisis that overtakes humanity on epistemologically speaking, ontologically speaking. A prior incarnation of the superweapon appears to have been acting as the midwife for the UFO manifestation of the beyond. And in our book, we support this contention with a passage found in the appendage to a 1949 report that was released by Project Sign. Now, what was Project Sign? Project Sign was an official government study on the subject of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force. In the appendage to Project Sign's report, there was a letter from Dr. James Lipp. Lipp was an aeronautical engineer and a department head at the RAND Corporation, an American nonprofit global policy think tank. The RAND Corporation was the epicenter for a lot of radical ideas regarding nuclear exchange and nuclear war. For instance, in 1963, the RAND Corporation produced a report that would serve as the foundation for Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara's policy of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. MAD would go on to become a national security centerpiece during the Cold War. It held that in a nuclear exchange, both the aggressor and the defender are destroyed. And so it's in neither's interest to engage in a nuclear exchange. MAD is widely considered to be the theory of deterrence put into practice, but like many other Cold War policies, MAD was characterized by function stacking. While it did, in fact, discourage both major superpowers from entertaining the notion of a nuclear exchange, it allowed the global oligarchical establishment to universally impose what my brother and I have referred to as nuclear anxiety. Now, nuclear anxiety is a pervasive and obsessive fear of nuclear extinction. And once the global oligarchical establishment induced this nuclear fever dream, and this period, an extended period of what you could call nuclear extortion took place. Sometimes nuclear extortion could even be found in some of the cultural artifacts of the day. And, there was a movie called, I believe at the time, No Lovers Left Alive, or something of that nature. There was a lot of these apocalyptic themed movies that came out that basically, put the fear of extinction, result of nuclear exchange taking place in the public's mind. So this connection of RAND to Project Sign indicates that the nuclear fetishist that cultural historian Bruce Franklin has called the cult of the superweapon were endeavoring to breathe life into a new incarnation of the beyond. Lipp's letter demonstrates that he was clearly a skeptic regarding the UFO question. He pointed out that the UFO reports in 1947 and in 1948 did not conform to the requirements of interplanetary travel. He then, however, goes on to provide the foundation for the exploitation of belief in interplanetary travelers. The foundation is found in one of the theories that he advances. Lip contended that there might be a causal relationship between atomic bomb test and the appearance of UFOs. Lip asserted that if real interplanetary travelers came to our solar system and were drawn to Earth by the detonation of nuclear devices. Lip's theory included this idea of Martian telescopes, usually visually detecting A-bomb explosions from Alamogordo or Hiroshima, and thus facilitating their travel to our planet. Lipton seemed to subscribe to his own theory. He didn't buy his own ideas. As a matter of fact, he points out many of the deficiencies in his idea in his own letter. Put quite simply, Lip believed that Martians would find observing the Earth over these long spans of time to be a really, really boring, mundane exercise. All of that aside, Lip had either intentionally or unintentionally contributed to a narrative that would be used to manipulate the UFO community for years to come. It was also used to deceive the public, generally speaking. Social engineers within the deep state introduced to the public imagination the notion that interplanetary travelers had detected our nuclear activities and were now visiting Earth with both benign and sinister intentions, depending on which extraterrestrial race you were discussing. The hands of the social engineers can be detected almost immediately following Project Sign as the UFO contactee phenomenon began to emerge. Nuclear anxiety was a common thematic thread running through the accounts of contactees. According to the contactees of the 1950s, the aliens had come to warn us that we need to cease our nuclear test, and the atomic test, according to the aliens, were leaking radiation that was having an adverse effect on the solar system's delicate balance. And as far as we're concerned, the contactees' message held too much in common with Lip's theory to be accidental. Our suspicions were confirmed by the strange story of the Polish-American author, George Adamski. Adamski claimed to have met with a veritable United Nations of alien races. These included the inhabitants of Mars, of Jupiter, of Venus, of Saturn. And during one visit to an alien craft, Adamski alleged to have met an alien emissary named the Master. And the Master, according to Adamski, provided descriptions of the political and social systems on the other planets. He allegedly told Adamski that the extraterrestrials had come to Earth on this salvific mission to prevent humanity from falling into nuclear extinction. And the Master explained that extraterrestrials came to prevent Earth's nuclear radiation from also adversely affecting the other planets. Now, skeptics write off Adamski as a mentally ill individual or simply a perpetrator of fraud. Adamski's supporters see his account as a confirmation that alien visitation is real. But there is this middle ground that is not being considered here, and that is the possibility that Adamski was manipulated by covert forces in order to popularize the contactee phenomenon that was being used for social engineering purpose. In 1953, Adamski published a book entitled The Flying Saucers Have Landed. And in 1955, he wrote a sequel entitled Inside the Spaceships. And in these books, Adamski tells us about his conversations with an alleged Venusian named Orthon. And Arthon supposedly invited Adamski to take a trip on a spacecraft and see the entire solar system. And when Adamski published this tale, a Cincinnati businessman named Thomas Eichhoff sought to have the United States government bring charges of fraud against Adamski. Eichhoff pointed out that Adamski had used the U.S. Postal Service to spread his account. If the account was untrue, Eichhoff asserted that Adamski had employed the U.S. Postal Service to perpetrate fraud. Eichhoff therefore felt that the U.S. government had a substantial case against Adamski. Eichhoff's accusations reached the attorney of a man who is regarded by many to be the consummate deep state operative during his lifetime, and that was CIA Director Allen Dulles. Dulles' attorney felt that Eichhoff was correct and that the government did have a case against Adamski. And so what did Dulles do with this information? Well, he threatened an injunction to prevent anyone from testifying in court about Adamski's claims, quote, because maximum security exists concerning the subject of UFOs, unquote. So why did Allen Dulles wish to prevent courtroom testimony against Adamski? Well, Leon Davidson, who was a chemical engineer who participated in the Manhattan Project, believed that Dulles and the CIA played an integral role in the manufacturing of the whole Adamski hoax. Davidson, in a 1962 article, contended that the CIA had orchestrated Adamski's close encounter experiences, including his famous 1952 desert encounter with a Venusian. According to Davidson, individuals working with the CIA convinced Adamski that they were space brothers, quote unquote, and persuaded him to write his books about them. And Davidson also asserted that the CIA had orchestrated Adamski's space flight to lend authenticity to the contact experience, whether it be through an actual real nuts and bolts craft or a mixture of hypnosis and drugs of some sort, something of the MK Ultra variety. We're not certain, but Davidson's accusations should not be dismissed as paranoia, because during a meeting between the CIA between CIA and Air Force representatives, a CIA official had suggested Davidson was somehow a threat to national security. The meeting had been held to discuss possible responses to inquiries submitted to the CIA by Davidson and Donald Kehoe. Donald Kehoe and Davidson had made a series of submissions, different requests regarding information to the CIA. And meeting participants allegedly treated Kehoe with honor and respect. And when the subject shifted to Davidson, however, the tone among the participants in the meeting changed considerably. The chemical engineer was spoken of with disdain, with contempt, and with a lot of suspicion. CIA officer present at the meeting, Frank Chapin, went as far as to imply that Davidson was motivated by ulterior motives, quote, some of them perhaps not in the best interest of this country, unquote. Chapin followed up this accusation with a proposal that the FBI conduct an investigation on Davidson. Chapin's accusation, and I've stated this before, in various interviews, but it's analogous to a bombing raid. During a bombing raid, bombers know that they are over the target because they receive an intense amount of flak. The flak that Davidson received from Chapin and his other CIA associates indicates that Davidson was not too far off the mark. He was pretty close to the truth regarding Adamski and other assertions that he had made. The CIA, simply put, didn't like Davidson because he had correctly identified the agency's role in ushering in the age of the contactee, the whole contactee phenomenon. It was an age that would end with a whimper and not a bang, because many of these contactees would be exposed as either complete charlatans or as victims of some kind of deep state manipulation, something that was suggestive of manipulation by covert political circles. Davidson also asserted in his 1962 article that the CIA had, quote, sponsored the wave of saucer articles in 1952 in Life and Look magazine, etc. Now, Life was a weekly magazine that was published from 1883 to 1972. And in 1936, the magazine was purchased by the American magazine magnate Henry Luce. Luce was the publisher of Time magazine, and Time would continue employing the Life brand after 2000 to release special and commemorative issues. Luce has been called, quote, the most influential private citizen in the America of his day, unquote. His influence appears to have extended to the realm of UFOs. Luce was, after all, the owner of Life during the period of time when Life was putting out a high volume of saucer articles with its chief competitor, Look magazine. Life magazine and Look magazine seemed to be in a competition to see who could put out the most articles pertaining to the UFO phenomenon. But Luce's influence in the realm of ufology may have gone deeper than that. That Luce's main factotum was Charles Douglas Jackson, or C.D. Jackson. Jackson was a senior executive of Time Incorporated and an expert in psychological warfare who served with the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, which was the forerunner to the CIA during World War II. During 1953 and 1954, Jackson was also instrumental in the formation of the Bilderberg Group, which is an elitist combine that has played a significant role in globalization. Now, according to the author Dave Wimhoff, Jackson acted as a nexus between intelligence circles, media organs, banking and financial interests, big business, and theoreticians in the realm of communications. Jackson was able to mobilize these different forces to advance the agenda of the oligarchical set here in the United States and possibly abroad as well. Wimhoff makes it clear that Jackson used these forces to conduct what has been termed, quote unquote, doctrinal warfare. Now, doctrinal warfare was an actual term in the CIA lexicon. It's not a militia or patriot movement fever dream. It's not a fever dream of the more paranoid side of the research spectrum. Anyone who doubts that needs to go to the CIA's online reading room and read a paper which we published in our we quoted extensively in our book. The paper is entitled, quote, "The Use of Doctrinal Warfare in a Political Non-Military Attack Against the USSR." The paper was read to an audience of CIA officials on October 20th, 1952. The document defines doctrinal warfare as, quote, "an attack through the medium of ideas on the motivation of a given target, which seeks to reorient the target's will in a selected direction," unquote. The document asserts that the Soviets were not reluctant to weaponize ideas, so America had to follow suit. So it's almost like an ideological arms race, if you will, being touched off. Doctrinal warfare, according to Wim Hof, included plans to infiltrate the religions of Christianity, of Hinduism, of Buddhism, and Islam, and essentially make them into surrogates of the American empire, which itself was merely a stepping stone to world government. It's my brother and myself, our contention that UFO disinformation played an integral role in doctrinal warfare. First of all, we have the Psychological Strategy Board, the PSB. Wim Hof informs his audience in his book that the PSB was responsible for coordinating doctrinal warfare. There is a now legendary memo that was authored by the Director of Central Intelligence, Walter Smith, in 1952, which calls for the PSB, the Psychological Strategy Board, to discuss, quote, the possible offensive and defensive utilization, unquote, of the UFO phenomenon. An even more substantial link exists than though between doctrinal warfare and UFO deception. One major participant in doctrinal warfare was Dr. Charles Lowry, the chairman of the Foundation for Religious Action. Lowry was responsible for authoring two memoranda that provided a strategy for transforming Buddhism in Southeast Asia into a mere appendage of the American empire. That plan was endorsed by then Vice President Richard Nixon, and went on to provide inspiration for efforts of the American intelligence community to colonize Catholicism. In 1954, Lowry was pivotal in organizing the Freedom Day. Freedom Day was an event meant to commemorate the anniversary of the revolt of East German workers and Polish and Czechoslovakian rebellions against communism that took place in June 1953. Freedom Day, which was celebrated on June 17th, 1954, was the brainchild of Nicolas de Rochefort. De Rochefort was a Frenchman and a psychological warfare expert. De Rochefort and Lowry worked together to see to it that Freedom Day was carried out. Later, on July 29th, 1954, both men were celebrated by Charles J. Kirsten, the U.S. representative from Wisconsin, on the floor of the United States House of Representatives for making Freedom Day a reality. De Rochefort is significant because he was one of many CIA officials who were involved in the infiltration of the National Investigation Committee Aerial Phenomenon, or NICAP. De Rochefort and several other CIA officials played a role in the founding of NICAP and ensuring that UFO investigations conducted by NICAP would be subject to considerable deep state influence. During his remarks on the floor of the House of Representatives, Kirsten stated that Freedom Day was, quote, an example of what is possible to achieve in the field of unconventional psychological warfare against communism through imagination and private initiative, unquote. So Kirsten made it clear that Freedom Day was a psychological warfare operation. Kirsten also stated that a quote-unquote lesson could be learned from Freedom Day. In Kirsten's view, Freedom Day provided an example it was basically an example of a project that was, quote, prepared and initiated by private initiative, unquote, rather than by the government. Kirsten then suggested that, quote, a private organization, unquote, be created to carry out psychological warfare projects. My brother and I believe that NICAP was formed in response to Kirsten's call to create a private organization for the purpose of psychological warfare. We're not alone in that contention. A very reputable UFO researcher, Jack Brewer, has pointed out that NICAP was incorporated some 27 months after Kirsten made his remarks on the floor of the House of Representatives. It appears to us that UFO investigatory bodies were being used to conduct doctrinal warfare. The personnel overlap is certainly there, but it wasn't just organizations like NICAP that were used to incorporate UFOs into doctrinal warfare. Motion pictures were also engaged in UFO-related doctrinal warfare. In addition to his important position at Time magazine, C.D. Jackson was also president of the National Committee for a Free Europe, which was a front for the Central Intelligence Agency, for the CIA. Executives in the Committee for Free Europe included Allen Dulles and Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower, of course, would go on to become president of the United States, and Dulles would become the director of the CIA. As I mentioned, and as I mentioned earlier, he was also the chief participant in the George Adamski UFO case. A member who was very close to the organization's executive committee was producer and studio executive Daryl Zanuck. Now, Zanuck had worked as a writer, and he had wrote more than 40 scripts during the 1920s for Warner Brother and moved on to become the head of production at Warner Brothers. In 1933, however, he left Warner Brothers, and after that, he became the studio. He and studio head Jack Warner had a dispute over salary. So, well, that's what led to him leaving Warner Brothers. But he then partnered with Joseph Shrink and started 20th Century Pictures. He and Shrink would transform the production company into a force to be reckoned with in the motion picture industry, especially in 1935 when they bought the bankrupt Fox Studios and merged it with 20th Century to form 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. But Zanuck became much more than just a major film producer. When America's entry into World War II came in 1941, Zanuck gained an intelligence background. He was commissioned as a colonel in the Army Signals Corps, and he placed his film company at the disposal of the United States government. The 20th Century Fox began to churn out films that were made with the supervision of the Office of War Information, or OWI, a government agency engaged in large-scale information warfare and propaganda. Both that information warfare and propaganda campaign was conducted both here and overseas. In Zanuck's mind, filmmaking and propagandizing became merged. They became married. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, motion picture art and information warfare, motion picture art and information warfare and persuasion became one in the same in Zanuck's mind. In 1943, while he was still with the Army Signals Corps, Zanuck was quoted as saying, quote, "If you have something worthwhile to say, dress it up in the glittering robes of entertainment, and you will find a ready market. Without entertainment, no propaganda film is worth a dime," unquote. So Zanuck developed a very good rapport with C.D. Jackson. He became part of a group of Hollywood figures that Jackson referred to as quote unquote friends. And this group also included Cecil B. DeMille, Jack Warner, and Walt Disney. Jackson turned to this Hollywood circle when he wanted certain ideas to be subtly relayed to movie audiences. Jackson was head of the Committee for Free Europe, and Zanuck was a member in 1951 when 20th Century Fox released what would become a very popular, important science fiction movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. The movie had a profound effect on audiences and left a permanent impression on America's cultural landscape. In 1995, the National Film Registry described the film as, quote, culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant, unquote. Usually, science fiction is very surreal. The genre can be very bizarre, and audiences always have this sense that what they are watching is divorced from reality. But with The Day the Earth Stood Still, the story was quite different. There was this really kind of, at least for that time, a very gritty, realistic style to it. Zanuck obviously wanted the audience to feel like they were viewing a very real event. Not unlike when Orson Welles had put on his War of the Worlds radio broadcast and really stressed a sense of reality with that production. Of particular importance to Xanax was the now famous scene when, in The Day that the Earth Stood Still, when Klaatu lands his spacecraft in the nation's capital and delivers his message to Americans and the rest of humanity. While discussing this scene with the movie's producer, Julian Blaustein, the movie screenwriter Edmund North, and the movie screenwriter Edmund North, Zanuck directed them to, quote, treat it as realistically as you possibly can, unquote. Zanuck wanted a documentary style to the UFO landing scene. He told North and Blaustein the following, quote, you should suddenly hear radio programs being interrupted with startling flash announcements from Washington, New York, Los Angeles, etc. The whole nation is listening in. This should be dramatized like the opening of a documentary film, unquote. Zanuck was also adamant that the audience, quote, must accept our entire project, unquote. Zanuck wanted the audience's full investment in this particular big screen experience. He wanted to make sure that the film's messages were fully imbibed by viewers. This was to be a propaganda piece, and the fact that it was supposed to be a propaganda piece was not lost on Blaustein, who was himself a Signals Corps and a member of the Signals Corps veteran. He was a veteran of the Signals Corps, and one of the messages that was introduced in the movie was that of salvation from outer space, a kind of extraterrestrial messiah figure. The principal alien character, an extraterrestrial named Klaatu, comes to Earth bearing this cautionary message meant to help humanity avert disaster and avoid extinction. Klaatu is misunderstood deliverer who even experiences resurrection after being fatally shot. This is, of course, a reference to Jesus Christ, but this Christ is firmly anchored to the Amanit world, an interplanetary savior instead of one sent to us by a transcendent God. And at one point, Klaatu escapes the custody of military guards and hides in a boarding house under the assumed name of quote unquote carpenter. Now, this is an obvious allusion to Jesus Christ, the carpenter from Nazareth. So Klaatu is supposed to be a surrogate for the divine, which is what Philip and I point out, the very definition of the beyond. The beyond is supposed to be a surrogate for the divine, something that displaces transcendent God, heaven, angels, demons, all of that. His message to mankind included includes a warning that the inhabitants of other planets are extremely concerned by the fact that humans have developed a primitive form of atomic power. And Klaatu tells humanity that if it continues on its present course, it will, quote unquote, face obliteration. This betrays the fact that the movie is supposed to act as a segue from the beyond invoked as the super weapon to the beyond invoked as extraterrestrials. Klaatu's message obviously calls to mind the theory advanced by Dr. James Lipp in the 1949 Project Sign report that I spoke about earlier. The Day the Earth Stood Still was released only 2 years after Project Sign was the Project Sign report, and it was foreseen by the Hollywood action chief, intelligence background, who was had extremely close ties to C.D. Jackson, a principal participant in doctrinal warfare again. So the probability that this was all coincidental is very small, to say the least. In 1983, journalist Linda Moulton Howe claimed that she was told by Air Force intelligence officers that the day the Earth stood still was, quote, inspired by the CIA, unquote. It was probably the only time that Air Force intelligence was honest with her. Howe was herself used as a disinformation conduit by deep state forces and elements of the public state that had fallen into some degree of corruption and deterioration, probably as a result of excessive Cold War paranoia. Richard Doty, an agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or AFOSI, provides the nexus between the deep state and the public state in the case of Linda Moulton Howe. As an AFOSI agent, Doty was representing a portion of the public state that had allowed its competition with Soviet intelligence to erode its integrity. The AFOSI's desire to counter Soviet intelligence efforts caused it to resort to to some of the worst kind of lies, deception, and disinformation, the very same techniques that the Soviets were involved in. So they had become no different than their Soviet competitors. In the case of UFO researcher and electrical physicist Paul Binowitz, the lies and disinformation led to delusional paranoia and to a nervous breakdown. In 1979, Binowitz began seeing and filming strange lights over Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. And he was also intercepting electronic communications. Binowitz was an eccentric and came to believe that this was evidence of extraterrestrial activity. The AFOSI was among those portions of the government bureaucracy that became concerned with Binowitz's investigation. They were afraid that Binowitz would become an unwitting puppet of the Soviets. In other words, his investigations would unintentionally reveal secret projects at Kirtland Air Force Base and other sensitive sites, such as the Montano nuclear weapons storage facility and Coyote Canyon test area. And through Special Agent Richard Doty, Binowitz was fed some of the most paranoid UFO disinformation ever conceived. And much of that you can read in the lore today in books such as William Cooper's Behold the Pale Horse, in the Dulcie papers, in the writers of quote unquote Commander X. But the very purpose of this disinformation seems to have been to engender extreme suspicion and irrational fear in the recipient, and seems to have had its desired effect, because in 1988, Binowitz was exhibiting all of the signs of severe mental distress, and his family had to place him in a psychiatric facility. But the AFOSI is not the only organization that Doty represented. During this whole sad Benowitz affair, it was revealed that Doty was either a representative or a member of what was called the Aviary, a group of intelligence operatives that derived its name from the fact that its participants assumed bird names as aliases. The AFOSI was obviously motivated by national security concerns. The Aviary's agenda, on the other hand, was authored somewhere within the bowels of the deep state. The Aviary was the classic example of a deep state entity. Its activities were morally questionable, and it did not receive its mandate from the public state at all. Doty presented Howe with an alleged briefing paper regarding alien visitation. Like the day the Earth stood still, the alleged briefing paper presents a Christ-like figure that originated with extraterrestrials as opposed to a transcendent God. Howe testified, quote, there was a paragraph that stated 2,000 years ago, extraterrestrials created a being that was placed on this earth to teach mankind about love and nonviolence, unquote. Reading this document caused Howe to believe that Jesus Christ was a herald of extraterrestrial civilizations instead of God's redeemer. The Messiah motif was basically being co-opted by deep state forces to promote concepts and ideas that originated with the oligarchical set, both here in the United States and abroad. The ends of UFO disinformation we find in doctrinal warfare is a quote unquote new Jesus preaching a new gospel tailored to the contours of the global oligarchical establishment's agenda for humanity. In this regard, UFO disinformation agents may be drawing inspiration from one of the progenitors of the modern deep state, and that would be the Bavarian Illuminati, which was the 18th century secret society that also and which also attempted to introduce a new Jesus and a new gospel. Now, a lot of sensational nonsense is out there regarding the Illuminati, but what we do know is that the Bavarian Illuminati's founder, the professor of canon law, Adam Weishaupt, abandoned the orthodox understanding of salvation. The orthodox understanding of salvation is that salvation as the restoration of communion with God through his son, Jesus Christ. That's the orthodox understanding. And what Weishaupt presented to his order is a different Jesus with a different path to salvation. Weishaupt states that Jesus came to teach man how to liberate himself from ignorance through the use of human reason, which Weishaupt capitalizes to indicate that reason is divinity incarnated as the human mind. For Weishaupt, reason was a surrogate for divinity, the agency through which man would solve all of his problems without any assistance from a transcendent God. Weishaupt wrote, quote, the seer preserved through the disciplinarium arcani and the aim appearing through all of his works and his deeds to give back to me is to give back to man their original liberty and equality. Now one can understand how for Jesus how far Jesus was the Redeemer and Savior of the world. The mission of Christ was therefore by means of reason to make man capable of freedom. When at last reason becomes the religion of man, so will the problem be solved, unquote. So Weishaupt was basically presenting this new Jesus that saved humanity not through a redemptive struggle, leading to Calvary, but by convincing man to basically demonize his own reason, to reach apotheosis by enshrining his reason as God. Weishaupt also saw himself as a kind of Masonic reformer. He believed Freemasonry to be a secret doctrine that Christ had taught to his apostles. Weishaupt asserted, quote, Freemasonry is hidden Christianity, unquote. And Freemasonry has very significant ties to the UFO deception through an individual named Christopher Mellon. Mellon's resume includes being a former United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and a former staff director of the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Christopher Mellon is part of the oligarchical Mellon dynasty that claims Pittsburgh entrepreneur and banker Thomas Mellon as its patriarch. Thomas Mellon belonged to the Pittsburgh Scottish-Irish industrial community. And this is significant because the Scottish-Irish industrial community owes much of its existence to Freemasonry. Freemasonry basically established that whole business community. Thomas Mellon's collaboration with Freemasons included loans to Henry Clay Frick, the infamous industrialist and union buster. And Frick embraced the Freemasonic conception of God. And he was also the treasurer of the King Solomon Lodge number 346 in Connellsville, and was a member of the Urania chapter number 192 at Greensburg. It was almost inevitable that the Mellons would imbibe Freemasonry. One of Thomas Mellon's sons, U.S. Secretary of Treasury Andrew William Mellon, was a Freemason, and according to a Freemasonic source, he attained the much coveted 33rd degree of Freemasonry. On March 9th, 2018, Mellon published an op-ed in the Washington Post that advanced a hostile UFO threat narrative. The op-ed cites videos of alleged encounters between the U.S. Navy F-18 fighters and unidentified aircraft. The film was declassified by the Department of Defense in 2017 and publicized by the To the Stars Academy, or TTS. TTS Academy is a company co-founded by Tom DeLonge, the guitarist for Blink-182. And in our book, we point out the fact that many of those associated with the TTS Academy have intelligence backgrounds and are known UFO disinformation agents. DeLonge seems to be a very, the most charitable way of putting it is naive individual who is being used to front for a UFO disinformation conduit. Christopher Mellon was with the TTS Academy, but has since left that company. We believe he might be expecting. Well, we thought at the time that he might be expecting some kind of appointment in Beijing by the Biden administration, and all. Although that's really just speculation. And all, but we think that's why he left the TTS Academy. It also could be just because the TTS Academy was not having the psychological impact that UFO deception circles were wanting it to have, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside since its founding. We just find it odd that the Two Stars Academy and the people who surround DeLonge, people like Tony Podesta and Peter Levenda, were Clinton partisans who backed any effort to remove Trump. Mellon himself was part of Bill Clinton's administration when he was Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. The Biden administration was in some sense going to be what Hillary Clinton's administration would have been if she didn't suffer such a monumental defeat at the hands of Trump in 2016. With the successful regime change and colored revolution of 2020, and that's exactly what it is. Even Time Magazine has admitted as much while employing a somewhat inverted hermeneutic while making its confession. All of these Clinton partisans, Mellon included, probably expected to be back in the government positions pretty soon, in their government positions pretty soon, when Biden came to office. Following his presentation in the op-ed, what he considers to be video evidence of UFOs, Mellon attempts to get his audience to entertain an extraterrestrial explanation by posing this posing this question. He says, quote, "Is it possible that America has been technologically leapfrogged by Russia or China? Or, as many people wondered after the videos were first published by the New York Times in December, might they be evidence of some alien civilization?" Unquote. Mellon then takes a brief excursion into the kind of Russophobia that is so customary to the American oligarchy, contemplating the possibility that the UFO incidents are confirmation of Russian President Vladimir Putin's claims regarding Russia's breakthroughs in the realm of propulsion. He then quickly returns to the alien explanation, however, asserting that, quote, "If these craft really aren't from Earth, then the need to figure out what they are is even more urgent," unquote. Mellon appears to be determined to prove to his reading audience that the UFO incidents he cites have serious national security implications. He even claims that the TTS Academy is, quote, "being approached by military personnel who are concerned about national security and frustrated by the Defense Department, its handlings of such reports," unquote. Mellon then proposes a solution that seems to be designed to reinvigorate America's national security state. He writes, quote, "Within a roughly $150 billion annual intelligence budget, money is not the issue. Existing funds would easily cover what's needed to look into the incidents. What we lack, above all, is recognition that the issue warrants a serious collection and analysis effort. To make headway, the task needs to be assigned to an official with the clout to compel collaboration among disparate and often quarrelsome national security bureaucracies. A truly serious effort would involve, among other things, analysts able to review infrared satellite data, NORAD radar databases, and signals and human intelligence reporting. Congress should require an all-source study by the Secretary of Defense while promoting research into new forms of propulsion that might explain how these vehicles achieve such extraordinary power and maneuverability," unquote. So, according to Mellon, such a quote-unquote serious collection and analysis effort would help decrease, quote, "the risk of strategic surprise." So Mellon wants us to believe that his proposal would assist us in avoiding some kind of cosmic Pearl Harbor, a surprise attack from the stars. Mellon's prescription, however, also seems to provide the rationale for maintaining a national security bureaucracy that concerns itself more with safeguarding a very arrogant, overstretched, failing American empire than it does with protecting the American public. The prescription also seems to set the stage for a whole new national security czar, one that uses a UFO threat narrative to build the case for not only avoiding the downsizing of the national security bureaucracy, but for expanding and growing that bureaucracy over time. And again, who exactly does that bureaucracy serve? History is full of cases that clearly demonstrate that the national security bureaucracy serves an American imperial project and not the American people. We couldn't help but wonder if, like the day the Earth stood still, Mellon's proposal was inspired by the CIA. The Mellon family is, after all, intimately tied to the CIA, going all the way back to the agency's forerunner, the Office of Strategic Services. Andrew Mellon's son, Paul, served as an administrative officer of the Special Operations Branch in London, and then as the commander of the Morale Operations branch in Luxembourg. Paul's sister, Ilsa, married David Bruce, and David Bruce was Paul's commanding officer and the chief of the OSS in London. There were Mellons and Mellon in-laws who held espionage posts in Madrid, in Geneva, in Paris. And later, there was Richard Mellonscaife, who was heir to the Mellon fortune and known for his manipulation of right-wing circles and the controlled conservative movement. Scaife owned Foreign World Features, a news outlet that supplied more than 300 newspapers. And in 1975, Foreign World Features was exposed as a CIA front. So with Christopher Mellon, we have to again entertain the possibility that the more pernicious elements of the CIA are playing a significant role in UFO deception. The CIA, however, is not the only entity standing behind Mellon. At least one online biography we found credits Mellon with drafting the legislation that established the U.S. Special Operations Command, USOCOM. USOCOM is the Unified Combatant Command that oversees various special operations component commands of the Army, Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force. USOCOM is at the center of America's special operations community. That community's specialty is, of course, unconventional warfare. One of the open supporters of unconventional warfare was former OSS officer and retired U.S. Major General John Singlob. And Singlob defined unconventional warfare as, quote, low-intensity actions such as sabotage, terrorism, assassination, and guerrilla warfare. And many UFO incidents actually conform to unconventional warfare as it was defined by Singlob. Like unconventional warfare, also known as low-intensity conflict, UFO incidents tend to be localized, and they tend to be restricted to a single, usually small geographic area. Recall the humorous observation that UFO incidents never high-profile kind of spectacles, and that take place on the White House lawn. They happen always out in the swamps or in the Netherlands, and are witnessed by backhill bubbas and the like. Like conventional warfare, UFO incidents involve some degree of subversive activity with inconspicuous operatives discreetly working behind the scenes. So many UFO incidents, like low-intensity conflicts, involve military personnel, but not in a combat capacity. Finally, both manufactured UFO incidents and unconventional warfare target the mind. The goals are ultimately psychological ones. Synthetic UFO incidents, like unconventional warfare, are primarily about radically altering people's perceptions and worldviews. All of this seems to suggest that the special operations community or at least elements of it are somehow involved in UFO deception. Is there, however, more substance to these connections? Well, Singlob provides the connection. Researcher Martin Cannon uncovered the fact that Singlob was a personal friend of Virgil Armstrong. Armstrong's online biography describes him, quote, as, quote, a retired Army intelligence officer who served 8 years with the country's top intelligence agency and 10 years as one of the original Green Berets, unquote. The biography also claims that during his time as an Army intelligence officer, Armstrong, quote, was a participant in the USA's first known capture of a UFO, Project Grudge, at Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico in 1948, unquote. Martin Cannon's interview with abductees turned up some very interesting facts regarding Armstrong. One abductee told Cannon that her extraterrestrial visitors advised her to actually seek out Armstrong and to join his quote unquote, skywatch activities. The abductee followed the directive and followed that advice and went to Armstrong's Skywatch event and discovered a New Age free-for-all. The abductee said that the event included a mass channeling session that aimed to send quote-unquote negative vibrations to Konstantin Chernenko, who was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time. Now, who were these entities that advised this abductee to seek out Armstrong? And why would they direct her to find a man with a background in intelligence and special operations who is promoting New Age practices? Some researchers might say that the abductees' extraterrestrial visitors are nothing more than products of covert terrestrial forces employing mundane technologies. Other researchers might posit a more sinister possibility that demonic forces, for lack of a better term, demonic force masquerade as extraterrestrial entities were guiding this particular abductee to Armstrong. The answer, in my brother and myself's view, is a mixture of both. We certainly believe that covert terrestrial forces are involved in UFO manipulation. The sheer volume of evidence has convinced us of that fact. We think, however, that religious demonology may also help contextualize at least some of the covert terrestrial forces engaged in UFO-related deception. Seen through the interpretive lens provided by religious demonology, some of these deep state operatives are more than just simply spies. They are practitioners of occultism who use magic, wizardry, sorcery, whatever you want to call it, to give their manufactured UFO incidents an air of authenticity. Recall the 1952 memo that I brought up earlier that was authored by the CIA director Walter B. Smith, his call for the Psychological Strategy Board, the PSB, to explore, quote, the possible offensive and defensive utilization of these phenomena for psychological warfare purposes, unquote, may have necessitated bringing people classified as occultists, wizards, sorcerers, magicians, witches, warlock into the ranks of psychological warfare specialists. This trend may have intensified by 1968. It was at that time, according to Brenda Dinsler, that there was a growing recognition among some in the UFO community that there was a link between psychic phenomena and UFO encounters. Many people involved in UFO incidents also claim to experience many different psychic phenomena, poltergeist-like activity among the, for instance. Those involved in occultism, of course, claim to have the ability to harness psychic powers. So naturally, criminalized intelligence circles and deep state entities would want to recruit occult practitioners. It would just make sense to deep state circles to do that, to bring on people that the average person would consider to be quacks. Someone who has recognized this fact and articulates the position very well is the perennialist Charles Upton. While we certainly don't agree with Upton's perennialism, we do acknowledge that there is a great deal of merit to his social criticism, which integrates deep politics and traditional metaphysics into the discipline. Upton posits that some of the covert operators behind the UFO deception are the what he calls the Aliyah al-Shaitan, which is an Islamic term that means saints of Satan or friends of Satan. Upton believes that elements of the deep state are very, very much in contact with quote unquote extraterrestrial intelligences, but not of the interplanetary variety. The intelligences Upton believes are what we would recognize as demonic or diabolic forces, many of which are masquerading as aliens, pretending to be aliens from some other physical world. Upton seems to divide the UFO deception into two tiers. Tier one is made up of the exoteric social engineers who are very naive and believe that all of the deception activities are mundane practices meant to alter mass belief. Some are, but certainly not all. The second tier is populated by the Aliyah al-Shaitan, esoteric black magicians and metaphysicists of the more pernicious variety, for whom the deception activities are nothing less than demonic invocations. This is an interesting theory, but the audience would say, "Well, this is an interesting theory, but is there any evidence to support the notion?" While exploring this possibility, we came across Operation Often. And Often was a CIA operation that was started in 1970. The operation was started by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the former chief of the agency's technical service branch, when he took over the agency's new Office of Research and Development, or ORD. Operation Often was ORD's first effort. It began with a $150,000 grant authorized by then CIA Director Richard Helms. The operation was based largely on Dr. Ewan Cameron's earlier research into the supernatural. Dr. Gottlieb stated that Operation Often's mission was, quote, to harness the forces of darkness and challenge the concept that the inner reaches of the mind are beyond reach. The project will aim to create a new kind of psycho-civilized human being, unquote. Gottlieb's use of the term psycho-civilized is quite disturbing. The term was also used by famed neuroscientist Jose Delgado. Delgado worked at Yale University and became a pioneer in brain stimulation research. His research allowed him to manipulate the minds and bodies of animals and humans by means of implanted electrodes. He also looked into the possibility that electromagnetic broadcasting could be used to achieve mind control, and the possibility that low-intensity electromagnetic fields could be used to alter DNA. For Delgado, a psycho-civilized society was a community completely devoid of the democratic spirit. It just wasn't there. Consider the following statement from Delgado regarding his philosophy, quote, "This new knowledge is so important that I think it should radically change the philosophy of our educational system, which believes in the sanctity of individuals, thinking that an individual exists at birth. This belief is not true, and this science is going to prove the fallacy of democracy in the sense that we talk about the rights of the individual. This democratic belief is not true. Because we are forming this individual, because we are constructing his brain, we are willy-nilly making the difference we either desire or dislike, unquote. So like Gottlieb Delgado, his work was financed by intelligence circles. In the case of Delgado, at least some of Delgado's funds came from the Office of Naval Intelligence. The two appear to have been working to undermine democratic institutions represented government under the pretext of pursuing scientific inquiry. They did this on behalf of covert political forces. So it's obvious that a psycho-civilized society populated by psycho by psycho-civilized by a psycho-civilized people is a technocracy maintained by an amalgam of scientific and intelligence circles on behalf of an oligarchy. Both Delgado and Gottlieb were pursuing that end. Gottlieb, however, was employing preternatural means in the pursuance of that end. In their effort to create a new, quote, psycho-civilized human being, unquote, Operation Often researchers made visits to palmistry parlors, to fortune tellers' booths, at fairgrounds, and the offices of psychics who had rich and powerful clients. Operation Often staff came to these New Age practitioners presenting themselves as researchers with the Scientific Engineering Institute, which was a cover selected by Gottlieb. This cover allowed Operation Often staff members to convince many clairvoyants to become consultants for an educational research program that operated in a CIA safe house based in Washington. And in that safe house, one would find CIA behaviorists consulting with gypsies and other New Agers about the reading of lifelines and interpreting cranial bumps. Operation Often also sought to exploit astrology, employing 3 full-time professional astrologers to predict the future. These astrologers were paid $350 a week to sit in soundproof booths in the safe house, reading a wide variety of newspapers and magazines in an attempt to discern the future. Like many expeditions into the realm of alternatives to traditional biblical religions, often graduated to the dark, inverted forms of spirituality. That shift occurred in 1972 when, according to author Gordon Thomas, Operation Often, quote, plunged into demonology, unquote. This was not religious demonology like one would find in the Catholic or Orthodox churches or any of the apostolically based communions. It was instead the variety of demonology that seeks to summon and control demons. At first, Operation Often researchers sought the assistance from the Monsignor in charge of exorcisms for the Catholic Archdiocese of New York. Needless to say, the Monsignor refused to be a party to the endeavor. The attempt to recruit them once that that attempt to recruit the Monsignor failed, Operation Often turned to a Houston-based sorceress named Sybil Leek for help. Leek helped Operation Often familiarize itself with America's satanic subculture. Through Leek, Operation Often staff learned that there were 400 covens operated by 5,000 initiated witches and warlocks in the United States. And these covens provided the foot soldiers for a prediction industry that supported 10,000 full-time fortune tellers and 200,000 part-time fortune tellers. This prediction industry held up a tarot card business that was growing and that was really growing at the time, and factories that churned out anti-Christian tokens. In the words of Gordon Thomas, quote, Satan was not only alive, but thriving in the country, unquote. Um, Gottlieb
Sorry,
wanted to weaponize.
what year was this? This is still from 1970 at the original, or is this later on that this report assessing
This,
the covens was written?
yeah, this is when this shift to Satanism with Operation occurs around 1972, when Sybil Leek is brought on board. And what I should mention also is that Sybil Leek very much believed that UFOs were demonic apparitions. But that's when the more 72 was when you leave behind these more cheeky, benign New Age elements, and you move into the really hardcore, dark, inverted forms of spirituality. And then Gottlieb wanted to harness that. He wanted to weaponize that Satanism, but he felt that it could not be done unless the devil was made respectable. So in order to provide the devil with an air of respectability, Gottlieb turned to the University of South Carolina. Using conduits, Gottlieb financed a course in sorcery at the university, and 250 students actually enrolled in that course. There was one veteran CIA officer who observed Operation Often's experimentation in Satanism. The author was William Bill Buckley, which I do not believe to be the same Buckley that founded National Review. It's different Buckley. He was an officer who acted as a special assistant to CIA Director William Casey. Buckley was a devout Roman Catholic, and he was horrified by what he saw. He described it as, quote, a mysterious magical vortex in an agency that was supposed to deal in facts and predictions based upon them, that the corner of the CIA which Gottlieb had set aside for his work with the devil was an inner black hole from which came the constant cries, there is no God, the cosmic deity is all. Talk of Ouija boards and white witches, chaos magic made the whole place sound like Halloween forever. These people were intelligent. They understood, for instance, classical philosophy, but their sense of what was real was a chasm away from mine. I would start to get papers they had written to evaluate. They had titles like "Cripple and Confuse Your Enemy with Satan," how a pendulum can become a secret weapon in locating Soviet submarines. What astonished me was the vast majority of Satanists were Roman Catholics. Many said they had tried the church and that it had nothing to offer, unquote. So so Buckley basically recognized the fact that they had gone off the deep end, yeah, with this 1972 shift. But Richard Helms ended up terminating Operation Often on December 10th, 1972. But the door between the CIA and the deep state and the Aliyah al-Shaitan has never closed. There are several individuals involved in UFO deception who may fall into the category of the Aliyah al-Shaitan. The list of suspects includes the Army Psychological Warfare Specialist, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Kino, who has passed on, retired Army Colonel John B. Alexander, and American engineer and parapsychologist Hal Puthoff, who actually participated in TTS Academy, the Two That Stars Academy, founded by Tom DeLonge. We look at all three of those individuals in greater detail in the book. Suffice it to say right now that all of these individuals have been deeply involved in UFO manipulation and occultism. In the case of Aquino, who founded the Satanic Temple of Set, there was a blatant, transparent Satanism. And if we are correct, and black magicians are in fact participating in the UFO deception, then people have to consider the implications of consorting with dark spiritual forces. Deep state operatives employing black magic and occultism are as much puppets as they are puppeteers. A covert operator who invokes demons enters into a pact with forces greater than himself or herself. And the deep state is well acquainted with manipulating and controlling people, but when it deals with these diabolical forces, it is in no position to dictate terms. I'm sure that deep state operatives that integrate black magic and occultism into their trade craft believe that they are firmly in control. In reality, however, they've deluded themselves. They are not. They are in fact at the mercy of these forces that are beyond themselves. And I think that Charles Upton put it best, quote, "The magician is hyperconscious of the influence he believes he is exerting on the world, but largely unconscious of the greater influence that the invisible world, possibly the demonic world, is exerting on him in the same moment," unquote. So perhaps that gives us a picture of how all this UFO deception ends with otherworldly forces that are nefarious and not benign, determining that their human puppets in the deep state have outlived their usefulness and can now be turned over to destruction. We have to understand that these infernal forces, if the apostolically based sects of Christianity are correct, have no love for humanity. One thing that almost all exorcists have described in exorcism sessions is an atmosphere of perfect hatred. That feature, in my opinion, seems to be universal. The only thing that that these otherworldly, these diabolical forces love about humanity is humans' utility. And once that utility is gone, the demon takes great pleasure in turning on his human collaborator. What ends up looking like, I really couldn't tell you at all. But that's basically what I have to share in a nutshell as part of my lecture.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Now there's a lot of good stuff in there. Filled up a lot of notes, a lot of things to take the lead on. And you're saying in your book you go through John Alexander's direct. You would say that he was definitely, because I also was coming up to that conclusion as well, that John Alexander is of the Aquino level of Satanism. You saw the same evidence too that you documented.
Yes. I mean, he's an associate. He was an associate of Aquino's when Aquino was still alive. David Atlee Phillips formed an organization called the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, AFIO. And both Aquino and John B. Alexander were a part of that, and probably had interface through that particular organization. And that organization seems to have had some participation in the UFO deception, which we go in and discuss to some extent in the book. Yeah. John B. Alexander was also if you go to his website, for instance, he has himself pictured with several of his associates. He was also associated with other UFO disinformation agents such as Edward Teller. He knew Edward Teller. He knew Bruce Maccabee, who bragged to Todd Zeckel about his association with the CIA. So John B. Alexander seems, in my opinion, to be a nexus point where intelligence-based UFO disinformation agents and occultism meet. They seem to meet at that crossroads.
Okay, all right. Good. So let's open up for some questions. Dave got in with the first question. So Dave, go for it.
Hi. Wow, that was a great presentation. I'm definitely gonna have to read your book now.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that. An
Apologies if
observer.
certain I'm sorry. Apologies if certain points got garbled and everything. I needed to take a drink and I didn't, and everything. Some
No,
water.
that's fine. That was great. Just an observation and then a question.
Okay.
I've been doing some research on the whole Renaissance, a revival of occultism in the Renaissance. So I'm working on this paper that really there were two Renaissances, and some of this was actually I was provoked by stuff Jay Dyer had said about the Renaissance, the Hermetic orders, and all that. And so I did a bit of a rabbit hole. So I see how this ties into the mystery schools. When we're thinking aliens, I just think even the Crowley Lamb alien, right? That's the idea of just channeling demons, entities. That's theosophy as well. And back in the day, you always had this. The theosophists were all about the idea of ancient sort of masters, right? And channeling those masters. And you had in the Renaissance before that, as a precursor, you had the Prisca Theologia, which is the idea of like a pure theology going back to Hermes, Zoroaster, and just down the line, they confirm Christianity, blah blah blah. Kabbalah confirms Christianity as well. And then you just today we fast forward, we have the ancient origins of civilization with aliens and ancient civilizations. So it all, I mean, it's like nothing new under the sun in that sense, I guess is what I'm just trying to say. You can kind of see the thing just morphs, but it's a lot of more of the same, right? They're not that creative at a certain point if we can zoom out enough. My question, therefore, I mean, when you see what like Tucker Carlson is doing and Alex Jones, like just their mind melting down with this alien demonology stuff that they're really leaning into. Like now people are supposed to be just afraid of like getting bitten by ghosts in the middle of the night. Tucker had his demon attack and stuff, and like as Matt said, you know, I mean, it seems like they want to break people's brains, right? They want to draw people into this mystical world of esoteric forces fighting it out, where at a certain point, people just become spiritually immobilized and they sort of relinquish their discerning faculties. That seems to be what they want to do with this stuff. And then you just kind of, but what do you think of Tucker and like, based on all your research, how are you reading this stuff?
You're asking like, does Paul think that Tucker's really getting molested by demons in bed with his dogs at night? Is what you're saying?
Well, the aliens, right? The demonology and the aliens are kind of they're putting it together, right? It's kind of I don't know that they're making that many distinctions. So I just want to know how do you've looked at all this stuff. So it seems like this stuff is playing out right now in a lot of the alternative media, and Jones, Tucker Carlson, and these circles seem to be a case in point. I just wanted to see if you had any
Yeah,
thoughts.
I think I know where you're going with that. I think there is a place uh, for um, for the employment of demonology in understanding a portion of the UFO deception campaign that's taking place, but it's not the way that Jones or Tucker Carlson are are presenting it at all. Um, th- I could be wrong, but I think that a source of inspiration for them is is Chuck Missler or people that were associated with Chuck Missler or drew from Chuck Missler, um, um, which is has this really kind of sensational edge to it, and um, that's what I personally think, and that's almost a whole other discussion there. Chuck Missler had done a book called The Alien Encounters, and he was trying to say in that book that the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6
I fixed that.
Sorry, that the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6 had come back again masquerading as aliens and um were basically assailing people and but his understanding of the Nephilim is really screwed up because he has this interpretation of Genesis chapter 6 that basically presents God as a eugenicist in the sky. That the Nephilim have come down to Earth and have polluted the gene pool of human beings. So the flood becomes necessary to purge this genic or atavist race that has been created by the Watchers. And that seems to be that's what Chuck Missler is basically saying. And Noah is not saved from the flood because of his righteousness. It's because he kept his gene pool clean. So that I think that's where that those ideas perpetrated by Chuck Missler, and Chuck Missler himself was just drawing on G.H. Pember of the Brethren of the Plymouth Brethren, which was a Gnostic sect that also gave us Aleister Crowley. But I think that the ideas that Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones are presenting concerning aliens and the supposed and the demonic connection to aliens there probably comes from Missler or from somebody that was drawing from Missler as a source of inspiration. And by the way, I don't know if he's misled or if he's consciously doing this, but Tucker Carlson is giving way too much credence to David Grush, and David Grush is he's a disinformation agent all of the way, and we pointed this out in our first article that appears at Canadian Patriot Review. Grush was represented by the Compass Rose legal firm, and the Compass Rose legal firm is nothing more than a repository for spooks. It was founded by Andrew Bacodge, who came out of the CIA, and his representation was Charles McAuliffe, who had been the Inspector General for the intelligence community. And you're trying to tell me that this guy is actually is actually a whistleblower that's trying to fight the powers that be to get the truth out about UFOs. Give me a break. He's represented by the power structure, and Tucker Carlson has presented Grush in a very positive light, and has even interviewed Grush. So I'm skeptical of some of what Carlson says, and I'm also very skeptical when it comes to Alex Jones. I always approach those. I don't totally discount what those two sources have to say, but I always approach them with a tremendous grain of salt and with a lot of discernment. You gotta read or listen to what they say with a lot of discernment. There could be some truth in there, but isn't that what disinformation is a lie sandwiched between two truths? So
Right.
So I hope it answers your question.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot.
Yeah, Paul, what I like about you guys, and I mean, we obviously differ in our analysis, as you know, and like we think that it's all trickery, magic tricks, and hoaxes that the Theosophists and these guys are doing, and they don't actually have real powers. So we don't think that. But what I really like about your analysis is that you are very aware of the political intrigue and all of these power players and institutions with their
Uh-huh.
techniques that have been like managing geopolitical systems behind the scenes. Whereas most people who
Yeah.
talk
Well,
about UFOs on any level or demonology, they tend to treat it apolitically almost, like with a complete ignorance and innocence, an absurd level
yeah.
of innocence to
Well,
the reality of these intelligence agencies and their methods. So I really like that a lot.
Well, in defense of your position, because I am open to critiques with mine and everything, there is the position in psychiatric circles that what's responsible for some of the phenomenon that we see coming out of these New Age circles is what's called automatism, and automatism holds that the human mind is is causing all these things quite unaware. But it doesn't matter at the end whether you believe that it's real diabolical forces or it's just automatism. The end result is the same, and it's not a good one because what dabbling in all this stuff can cause is what psychiatrists refer to as mediumistic psychoses, where where the medium or the practitioner of all this stuff uh, goes insane, and whether it's very real diabolical forces from another ontological plane, or it's just the human mind and unwittingly doing this to itself, and all. The ending is mediumistic psychoses, and all the and so if you get the whole public involved in this via the UFO phenomena, you could see mass psychoses,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that
no
would
matter
not
what,
be a good.
yeah,
Yeah,
no matter what, it's going to be really, really difficult to develop into an instrument of God's reason and will in life if that's the type of mindset you've chosen, regardless, like you said, of like what's behind it. You won't be able to be your true self at the end of the day. You're going to become some kind of
yeah,
broken, detached psychopath, or not psychopathic, but you'll go through some form of psychosis.
yeah.
Definitely. So
You're
yeah,
gonna, you're
good
gonna
points.
need some degree of therapy. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, right.
And just to add to that, I mean, technically, that's what they would want, though, is that mass psychosis in order to then introduce the new ideas,
Yeah.
right? You
yeah.
you got to break people spiritually and get them deep enough into that mysticism to then, all right, here you go. Like then you give them the new ideas. Then they're
Well,
gone.
yeah, isn't that what it's all about to the MK Ultra sorcerer at the end of the day? What mental illness is to him? Mental illness is an instrument. It makes a person pliable. It
Hmm.
makes a person. It opens up a person to gives a person a greater degree of suggestibility and all. So yeah, at the end of the day, that's the end point, and that's not a good thing. That's something that we all would like to see avoided. So
Absolutely. Monty.
Yes, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate the presentation. This is my second go around today with some deep things that I've engaged with. And number one, a friend of mine, I think the world is in need of an exorcism. I mean, we really have become possessed in a certain sense, insofar as this state of mass schizophrenia. And associate of mine, which Matt is familiar with, proposed today that what he thinks might very well need to happen is a mass a motion picture film that can reveal some of this insofar as it would have mass appeal to a wider audience. And at the same time, just previous to this, I was reading Cynthia Chung's Substack on Percy Shelley on the Ghost Seer. And
Schiller.
indeed, this stuff goes way back.
It's
So
Schiller's goes here.
Okay. So in regards to that, this stuff goes way back, and so far as this magical tricks being played by the Venetians and so forth, and magical tricks that have been put forth. And my question to you, I can't help but think of maybe perhaps a good topic for a film might be along the lines of what David McGowan wrote about Laurel Canyon and the covert ops in Laurel Canyon, which address many of the same personalities that you've been thinking of, like Robert Heinlein and Stranger in a Strange Land and the Manson family. But in particular, at the center of Laurel Canyon was a place called Lookout Mountain. Was developed as an Air Force secret laboratory in 1941. But by 1947, it became the world's largest 100,000-foot film production studio with all the Hollywood luminaries, 250 directors, producers, all of these people involved in it. They put out 19,000 classified motion picture films on propaganda. And this wasn't revealed until 1990. They kept this covered. I mean, it's right in Laurel Canyon, for God's sake. So I was just wondering if you had a familiarity with this and what you think about it.
I read that book.
All right.
Yeah. And he's really suggestive that, the whole Lookout mountain and the whole military milieu was involved there in the creation of the counterculture. And what I really wished that he would have made some more solid connections in the book. I really wish that he had. I mean, like he does provide the researcher with a lot of avenues to go down into study and everything. He doesn't seem at the end of the day to me to fully bring those sinews all together and everything. And I think that if McGowan had lived longer, he would have and everything. But I certainly believe that there is something to that, like you're saying. And everything.
Yeah, I concur with that too. He just died too early. But the one thing he did bring up was that who seemed to be the overseer of this throughout this counterculture op was the Rand Corporation, which was headed, I forgot the general's name, but I think he was affiliated with Operation Phoenix in Vietnam. So there definitely was a CIA, MK Ultra, government, Hollywood, LSD, MK Ultra connection that came together, and I think this would be a good topic to further put out to people because it is very intriguing.
Oh, absolutely. The Phoenix program, and McGowan pointed this out in another book that he had written, Program to Kill. It seems that they were testing these ways of traumatizing the public over in Southeast Asia. And then they were importing them back to the United States, these same techniques. And the Phoenix program came to roost here in the United States under various manifestations. One being the serial killer phenomenon, and but it also might the Phoenix program might also have manifested here in the United States in some way with the UFO deception and all. Look at right now with these drones in the sky. They're terrorizing people. People are scared and all. Here in my own where I live in Niobrara County in Wyoming and everything, people are spooked and all because they've been sighted here, and that was largely what yes, it was an assassination program, but what Phoenix was really all about was inflicting causing a certain psychological impact on the target population. And so I think that this could be a, a manifestation of Operation Phoenix here at home, or at least in the very least drawing on Phoenix as a source of inspiration, so.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, and the fact that Aquino was a part of Operation Phoenix as a Green Beret in Vietnam, he was also tied to the Process Church and the Manson family, which has weird Scientology overlaps too. Might have even been the Zodiac killer for, it seems that, from what I've seen so far. I don't know if you've seen that Aquino might have been participating in the Zodiac murders.
There was a great series of articles that came out in the San Francisco newspaper, and I can't remember the name of the publication that covered that possibility. That covered that was a distinct possibility and everything. So yeah. I know that he began perfecting ways of scaring people with the preternatural world and with otherworldly by invoking otherworldly sources when he was in Vietnam, because Dale Seago, who had worked with Aquino over in Vietnam, talked about how Aquino would have like helicopters fly well above the cloud coverage during storms, and play the sounds allegedly of demons dragging the deceased Viet Cong, I believe it was, into hell and all. So he had begun perfecting some of those techniques over in Vietnam, over in Southeast Asia. Now, why would he stop when he got back to the United States? There's no reason for us to believe that he would have, stopped perfecting these ways of inflicting trauma and psychological damage on the target population. And the Zodiac could have been a way of doing that. Hey, kill a few people dressed up in very strange garb and all. Think of the psychic boiler that it just created there amongst the target population. Am I next? Is it safe to go outside? It just so while it's still within the realm of speculation, it's a reasonable speculative trail to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this ties right into Edward Lansdale. Somebody wrote, started in the Philippines. Yeah, like that's entirely the Lansdale operation, right? To utilize these illusionist tricks to capitalize on the superstition of local populations that you want to have self-destruct. Whether it's like elimination by illumination for Castro to shoot up, high intensity light beams into the skies over Cuba to convince the Cubans that the second coming is now,
was
unless
coming
they
back.
yeah.
Yeah. To show you, okay, my wife is Filipino. Is a Filipino. And to show you how effective Lansdale's operation was over there and all, they had some kind of incident at their house, at the house in the province, when my wife's youngest sister was born. And her mother was convinced that the Aswang had attempted to make entry into the house to get to the brand new baby, to her youngest sister, and all because Aswangs allegedly, like the smell of the new baby, want to eat the new baby and everything. And the Aswang was a centerpiece of Lansdale's operation. And all he said, hey, they believe in these vampiric creatures. Let's grab some communist insurrectionist, put a few puncture marks in his neck, kill him, put a few puncture marks in his neck, drain his blood, and leave him out there and all. And everybody will think, oh my God, it's the Aswang. They're killing off the communist insurrectionists among us and everything. So, I mean, and my wife was born in 1985. Her sister, was born sometime in the 90s. So that use of the lore, that harnessing of the lore, still resonates with those people to this very day.
Wow.
to this very day. So yeah, I mean, it has a powerful effect what people like Lansdale and others have done. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you think, before I'm hogging you now, but I just on that same note, before I go to the next questioner, do you think that that method was also behind the cattle mutilation stuff, where they would just, like in the 70s, leave all these cows mutilated for people to see, or were there multiple reasons for the cattle
I think there,
mutilation crap?
I think you're right there. I think there was function stacking because the cow's eye bears resemblance to a certain ethnic group, so they might have been testing out biological weapons on cows in a hopes that those biological weapons could then be used on a certain ethnic group. But I think that it's also, like you said, you're taking this cow apart for no apparent reason, draining it of its blood, and what are the people going to do? Whether they're going to become fearful and they're going to eventually start attributing it to otherworldly sources. They're going to eventually begin imposing, superstition on what they have seen and everything. So yeah, I think it's function stacking there. That it can be both.
Mhm. Stephen Doyle.
Well, thanks for a really fascinating lecture. I have an Air Force background from Canada. I've done kind of the just most basic exposure to information ops, psyops, kind of kindergarten, not op Phoenix. So I find this stuff fascinating. My question kind of gets into the psyops and the Hollywood side of it and the tie into Disney. And there are a series of Disney movies starting in the mid 70s that kind of fall into this kind of general topic. The escape from Witch Mountain, the two orphan kids with the psychic abilities, and it turns out they're star children, and the UFO takes them off. 79, you remember that, eh, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was 79 Disney's Black Hole, and some have equated the black hole to the Black Sun occult thing, and it kind of seems to anticipate the Nazi Bell legend, anti-gravity, Germany, the bad guys. The Disney Pixar 2009 Up seems to reflect the airship mystery from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And especially when you look at, and again, you have the bad character being German and all that sort of stuff. And there's, when you look at the credits afterwards, they have these little, almost like screen caps of some of their characters interspersed with the credits. It seems like there's an Antarctica and nuclear detonation themes, arguably allusions to pedophile symbolism. There's just some weird stuff. And you get on and you get Disney did John Carter, I think around 2012, big economic turkey again. Yet somehow it's got thoughts about superior gatekeepers, for lack of a better term, using religion to control people. So you had these series of movies coming out of Disney, supposedly the family bunch. Has anyone ever dug into Disney in terms of the UFO psyop and or looked for military psyop connections, some of those famous names, or is this kind of virgin territory to look at?
Oh, well, I think that it has to the deep state. Probably was, well, CIA found the land that Disneyland, which did was yeah, or I think it was Disney World. It was, believe it was Disney World, that the land where Disney World is set is established. He basically, found that land for Walt Disney to put Disney World on. And Disney World has had as its animators several former Nazis, and also collaborated on I believe it was a set of maybe it was NASA propaganda short films that featured Werner von Braun in it and everything. So there's definitely a nexus there, where Hollywood and where the world of film meets with the occult and with the deep state. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Jerry.
Yes, thanks. Wonderful presentation, Paul. I've got about 3 pages with notes here I got to go over later. I just have a short question. When you were talking about Operation Often in 1970, and you brought up Sidney Gottlieb, and you mentioned psycho-civilized society, and you referenced Gottlieb to Ewan Cameron. Now, my question is, Ewan Cameron, are you talking about the Ewan Cameron, Dr. Ewan Cameron, who was up here in Montreal doing MK Ultra experiments, that SOB? Is that the guy you're talking about with Gottlieb?
Yeah, exactly. The very same. Who I believe caused the elephant to have a acid trip too, I believe. Killed it. Yeah, it's the very same. The very same. Exactly. So there's an overlap between the MK Ultra and the occult through Operation Often, but that's not the only overlap. There's several other overlaps there and everything, between MK Ultra mind control experiments and the occult. If you look at the techniques that were used by doctors like Ewan Cameron, like Sidney Gottlieb, others that were associated with MK Ultra, you find very little that a scientist would recognize as regular scientific methodology. They're like, what the? We don't do this stuff in a lab and all. But then you show this exact same methodology to someone who claims to be an occultist, somebody that claims to be a wizard, a sorcerer, and they're like, oh yeah, I totally recognize that. And all. We do that stuff all the time and all. So yeah, but yeah, it's the exact same Ewan Cameron.
Thank you very much. That it really connects that MK Ultra with this UFO and all the psyops. Thanks very much.
Hey, thank you.
Sorry, I realized that I was muted. I was just going to say, based on some of these considerations, when you do look more critically at the history of like psychiatry per se as a field, you start realizing it doesn't take too long to realize that all of the models of what is the mind, what is mental health, how do you do it, Freud, you start looking at Carl Jung, they're all into the occult. Like they're all primarily self-identified magicians trying to invoke, demons and other stuff. Like they're all doing that. And then it took some years to figure out how do you give a sort of scientific veneer to this witchcraft. And they just like elaborated, every few years on this stuff to the point that it becomes a science of psychiatry, which it's not a science at all. It's in no way a science. It completely denies the soul. It denies any principle of the connection between human beings and a living, reasonable love, like a loving creator. That's just rejected a priori. So it would make sense then that you see, people like these next generation Freudians and Jungians working at Tavistock trying to fragment the human personality into little bits to try to, create superhumans with superpowers. And this is what Artie Lang is doing and other stuff, but it's very, I don't know if you have any thoughts about the origins of psychiatry per se or based on this stuff.
Well, when you start off with when you start off with individuals like Thomas Aquinas and his approach to psychology and psychiatry and the like and all, the soul is still very much involved in the process. You're looking at human beings as creatures that might have a biological animal side, but they also have a a soul. They're not just a body. They're not just a reactive animal. They have a soul there. And so what Thomas Aquinas gave us in the realm of psychology and psychiatry is is very helpful. But then you come along later, much later on, with the Prussian state and with Wilhelm Wundt. And Wilhelm Wundt divorces the psyche from psychology. If we understand psyche to mean soul, then all of a sudden it's removed from the picture, and he says human beings are soulless and are reactive animals. And when he does that, when he divorces the soul from psychology, all of a sudden he's set off a chain reaction that continues to the current day, where the mental health profession does not understand the subject of its study, which is the human being. It can't understand, because it sees it it sees human beings as soulless creatures, as a house cat or a dog, or that sort of thing, and all, and thus opens it up to the kind of conditioning that we see with animals and the like. And it started with Wundt, and Wundt's grandfather actually had ties to the 18th century Illuminist that I brought up in my talk, the Bavarian Illuminati. And once again, there is a lot of sensational crap floating out in the ether about the Illuminati, but they were very real. And Adam Weishaupt and his Illuminists were trying to displace Jesus as understood by the Orthodox Christian, both capital and lowercase o tradition, with this kind of revolutionary that was enshrining reason as man's new God. And so, of course, Wundt's grandfather, that influence was there and tainted his findings and tainted his work, and Wundt in turn tainted everything that was to come thereafter, where you get to the point where you find very little in the realms of psychology and psychiatry that's of merit. You find very little people that are helpful. Carl Jung, Freud, Watson, Skinner. It's definitely Skinner. None of these people were helpful. And I would say that they've actually had a deleterious effect on the human condition and all. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about that. I would start it off with Freud. If we had continued with the same line of thought that we had that began with Thomas Aquinas, we might have actually had an intellectual and academic discipline that was worthwhile and actually helpful to human beings and all. But Wundt threw that all out the window, and unfortunately, his perspective is what seems to dominate the mental health field and the field of psychology and psychiatry to this very day.
The one class I had in university on psychology was an elective, but it was like and it was a giant auditorium, and the professor gave his first lecture on the sort of overview, the history of psychology as a science, and he touched on the irrelevant thoughts of Plato and Socrates and Saint Augustine and Aquinas. He just like brushed over that in 5 minutes, and then the whole thing, 2 hours, was then the day came when Wilhelm Wundt came into this world and was treating him like a messiah, and everything starts with Wundt. And it was like a weird, just religious ritual of homage to this weird character who like figured out a way to like measure people's brain synaptic activity when you torture them or something. Like, wow, that was quite the insight.
And think about the milieu that he's coming out of. The whole Prussian milieu. The Prussians were, traumatized by the defeat to Napoleon at during the Battle of Jena. Well, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? Well, we need people that just don't think that much. They just do.
Right.
That's what the problem was, is that they analyzed the situation too much and they hesitated and all. So we need to come up with a 3-tier society, where the technocrats that have the actual multidisciplinary education and a holistic education exist at the top, and then you have below that a bureaucratic class, and then right below that the great mass of people who are automatons. They don't think, they just react to the stimuli that we give them and all. And that's what you kind of birthed Vunt, or Vunt birthed it. There's a question of chicken or the egg there, but who's splitting hairs, that they're both they both influenced one another, and as a result, kind of brought about a Prussianization of the mental health field, and it's had a ruinous effect on humanity, just a ruinous effect.
Yep. Jean-Sébastien.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm out of battery. I only have 3%, so hope I got enough. Quick question. Forgot where I was going back then, so it's about confusion anyway. But first of all, thank you for you and your brothers. Both were really useful discourse, I'd say. And sorry, I'm French, so sometimes I seek my words. You mentioned a list of intellectual, let's say, and I was wondering, since we are now battling about the psyop on aliens, mostly after 1950, I'm always more interested into things under the 80s. And I think human is the same as before as today. So what would you say about Kepler, Galileo, and Copernic, since mostly everybody we're talking about now are Freemasons, liars in disguise, mostly, or other cult adepts. But those 3 guys were also feeding on Médicis library and occult adept. So why do we trust something that comes from what we don't trust at a point in time? Because if aliens are a decoy, could angels be too? I'm reading Gary Wayne and about the Nephilim you talked about. Those are word for word fallen ones, fallen from Eden. If they could copulate with women, it would make them flesh, not angels. So that's a old psyop related to the now. But in between, there's the geo and heliocentrist theory that's going out of the NASA stuff. So all this to say, I'm really confused about what is true and what is not in life. I've been studying for 9 years, every book I can read daily, nonstop, and taking class with guys like you, many other guys like you too, and Matt and everybody. And I have a perplexity about we are already on some basis that aren't proved yet. And that would be the source of confusion on many things. So I just wanted to add that it's really confusing, all this. So thank you for making it clearer for the aliens. But I still have my question about the validity of the ancestors of who today we are, like Jack Person and all the others, claiming as liar, and they are. I think their ancestors were too. So that's about it.
You mean that when you say their ancestors, you mean like the precedents, those who came before them in this occult sort of tradition?
In the same cult, yes. Not directly their ancestors, so in some case, yes. But I mean the order of the School of Mysteries. It's not only the alien that they lied about and that they tormented population with many, let's say, psyop. So I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a rounder. I'm just a wanderer. I'm wandering. And I can't take for granted the words of either the guys in the 50 or 1050 as the guys of nowadays with the alien stuff. You see, so NASA, it's all Freemason stuff. It's all Freemasons in it. All the pictures are CGI. There's so many confusion around this. I'm not wanting to go anywhere with that, except that it's all the trust. I have a hard time to trust the basic we already in. So to end it and how trust can break my mind, the Billy Carson I mentioned in the chat just got destroyed by the West Off. Billy Carson, some people are aware of what happened in the early of the month. So that's good news. One liar less. But the bad news about this is how can now we trust Sean Ryan, Rogan, all the others who gave their trust into this guy and give them a visibility through their podcast? And then finally, the same question comes for Donald Trump. He doesn't need to be a Freemason to be related with all the things we are talking about today. I would be surprised he is unaware of all those things today. So I don't understand why anybody has a trust in anything else. For me, I trust myself, my son, and my mother. That's it. For the rest, it's hard. So Trump is for me the same as Billy Carson. That's
okay.
A shoot I can do.
Yeah. Okay, I know that that Matt is familiar with it and has actually even spoken to Tom Luongo and all, and Tom Luongo has emphasized time and time again that it's important that we don't go down what he refers to as a purity spiral. And a purity spiral is basically where you make the good the enemy of the perfect enemy of the good. What does that mean? That means that history's protagonists are not going to be perfect. They're going to be good, but they're not going to be perfect and all. Like I like to think of myself as a protagonist and all. I have had my moral failures in life. I've had my screw ups and all. The Kennedy brothers were, in my opinion, undoubtedly protagonists. It's obvious that they had their moral failures. It's clearly obvious. No, they did not kill Marilyn Monroe, but they certainly had a weakness for women. And all, and not every Freemason is involved in the occultism, or there are pernicious strains of Freemasonry, and then there's just benign lodges and all. Much has been made about the fact that George Washington had been part of a Freemasonic lodge, but what many people know is that he hadn't even stepped foot in it and really had no real correspondence with it in like 30 some years. And yet they're trying, organized Freemasonry, institutional Freemasonry tries to play him up as this great Mason in the picture wearing his apron and the like. It's important that we don't go down purity spirals and say, well, everybody that's a Freemason, is
I understand that.
Yeah, involved in some kind of Freemasonic plot to take over the world. And yes, Kepler and other and some of the individuals that you mentioned, had some kind of Freemasonic association there. but it was so entrenched in the milieu at the time, it was hard to avoid. My maternal grandmother had been a part of the Eastern Star when she was a little girl, and then it didn't follow her into adulthood, and all. The woman was a wonderful woman, and all. Just a loving mother and a loving grandparent. So you have to approach the whole thing with some nuance, keeping nuance in mind, and with Trump, and is he aware of some of this stuff? You said that he's aware of. I'm sure to some degree he's aware of it. He had his associations with Roy Cohn, so he's aware he was probably aware. He's probably aware of the fact that sexual entrapment and sexual blackmail do take place. All to some degree, I think he'd like to see that expunged from the American political experience so that we could actually have a functioning republic and all. And as far as UFOs go, I think that he might have some knowledge there. His uncle, John Trump, had gone through the Tesla papers. Yeah, the Tesla papers, and it saw the amazing things that Tesla had come up with, and when those papers were seized by the FBI, so he might know that there are some amazing advancements there in the realm of R&D, and might understand that there is some kind of psychological operation that's going on against the public right now. Does that make him, though, a participant in all of it? No,
But
he's we have to approach this kind of thing with a nuance, understanding that our protagonists are going to have human failures. They're going to have places where they fell short, and that doesn't instantly make them one of history's antagonists and all. That's one of my problems with Whitney Webb, who is
yeah, I
above
I wrote this book.
she is above and beyond me a better researcher. She is, and all. And I find it hard to attack the woman because she actually cited one of my articles in her first volume of her book. So how can and all? But she does seem to want to write off everyone who ever had a defense contract or an association with the intelligence community, or had a moral failure somewhere down the line, slept with somebody that they shouldn't have.
She will
she
be a
wants
purity. How you said that? Purity.
purity spiral.
She will be the kind of purity spiralist, in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
exactly.
I have this bad habit of being a purity spiralist. I didn't know that word. Maybe it is. But for about last one thing that is a stain, since I'm a purity too. The father of Trump did make his wealth through the buying of housing for military. So is it possible that in a well-class family like they have, one of the son decides to not follow what the father and the grandfather did? Because
well, you just told the Kennedy story right there, because their father was involved in prohibition era, like running of moonshine and all that sort of thing, and illegal alcohol, and involved in the mob. And he wanted better for his sons than what he had. He wanted them to actually make the difference that he had been incapable of doing, and so he actually raised them partially right. And so they deviated from their own class to an extent. Another good example: Roosevelt's family was steeped in the opium running, the clipper ships, the Boston Brahmins, who were associated with the British, and running opium and everything. But Roosevelt actually started to deviate from that whole tradition, and was actually opposed to a lot of the more negative aspects of what the British Empire had wanted in the post-war world. What they wanted a continuation of the kind of colonialism that had preceded World War II, and he deviated from he deviated from that, and in spite of several negative corporate influences there, and his own family background, he was actually able to get some very positive things done. I know he had a private intelligence organization that was made up of Alger Hiss, of Harriman, of a few other people that were nefarious and all, but he didn't mean that private intelligence organization to somehow collaborate with the Soviets, which it seems to have done. It seems to have acted as a bridge between the American elite and the Soviet elite and all. What he wanted it to do, and what his intentions were, was that it would be a diplomatic back channel to keep us from destroying one another. And all. So, you have to look at people with this kind of nuanced lens that takes into consideration all the complexity of the situation. And yes, that's a freaking headache. That's a freaking headache. It's easier to just say they're all Illuminati. They're all Freemason and all. But it leads you down the wrong rabbit hole, and it's intellectually lazy on our parts. It's true. So
for the word, I'd say only time will tell. And everything. I keep studying meanwhile.
Yeah, and you also brought up the fact, about Genesis 6 and the whole Nephilim doctrine that came out of this. Well, they had to have been physical for the Genesis conspiracy, the Genesis 6 conspiracy. And all. I believe that the proper interpretation of Genesis 6 and the way that we should understand it was provided by two Orthodox authors in their book, The Lord of Spirits. And that's Father Stephen Damick and I can't remember Stephen DeYoung and Father Stephen DeYoung. It's like, if these are spiritual beings, they don't have sex organs. So what's going on here? What are these? What are the Nephilim and all? Well, in the Mosaic books, they talk about the book the bed of Nod, which is this huge bed. And what you come to find out, and what Damick and DeYoung talk about, is that there existed in antiquity, in certain civilizations, pagan civilizations, especially among their elite, these ritualistic beds. And what they would do is they would get on these beds with a temple prostitute or a slave girl. They would put on the mask of their god, so they're acting as a proxy for their pagan god, and they would copulate. And the child that was born of that copulation was the Nephilim. They weren't actually large in a physical sense. They were giants in that they were tyrants and all. It's a pictorial shorthand for a tyrannical class and everything. And so from a biological standpoint, you're dealing with very real biological children of human beings. They're not human angel hybrids. Okay, they're not. From a ritualistic standpoint, they are the children of the gods and everything. That's the middle ground that I think everybody is missing on this. That Chuck Missler probably missed intentionally. Again, Chuck Missler, many people don't realize this. He was involved with the Council for National Policy, which is a deep state institution with a more right of center orientation. He was associates with Dr. Edward Teller. He had a business connection with Edward Teller. He had intelligence connections there and all. But so he might have missed this intentionally, but he spread this around, this whole idea. And actually, if you want to get technical, the whole idea actually began with G.H. Pember, and who was part of the Plymouth Brethren, which was more Gnostic than it was Christian, and gave us Aleister Crowley, and who was a Satanist, and that's why we have this symbiotic playoff between the Christian fundamentalist and the Satanist. Why is it that so many Christian fundamentalists become Satanists? And why is it that so many Satanists become Christian fundamentalists? Well, could it be because they share the same damn eschatology? That's what Aleister Crowley told us. Aleister Crowley told us as much. He told us that he bought into the whole dispensationalist BS that had begun with Pember and Darby.
I gotta just read this. I was just reading this book on Crowley's, basically essays on Crowley, and they excerpt from something Crowley said when he said, Crowley saying this, right? I accepted the theology of the Plymouth Brethren. In fact, I could hardly conceive of the existence of people who might doubt it. I simply went over to Satan's side, and to this hour, I cannot tell why. Space.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, it was totally. He was totally a Darbyite.
Yeah,
He just wanted to be he was totally into the Antichrist forecast and the premillennial dispensationalism. He was totally into all of that stuff. He just said, okay, it's going to be my book of law, and I'm going to be the Antichrist that invokes this this summoning.
It gives certain fundamentalists an ever loving heartburn, like Derek and Sharon Gilbert, and just a whole plethora of other writers of that vein, and all. It gives them ever loving heartburn to face this, but they share the same eschatological ponderings of Aleister Crowley and of certain satanic sects. They do. They do. And so, but again, back on the whole Nephilim question, that came out of fundamentalist circles that are definitely manipulated by the deep state and that whole Nephilim doctrine that just seems wild and wildly popular today, and the real middle ground that seems to be believed by the more apostolically based communions, Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Eastern Catholic, Byzantine Catholic, Anglican, and all is what I just told you about the ritualistic beds, and it's really laid out and distilled really well by Stephen DeYoung and Stephen Damick and their book Lord of Spirits. So I would encourage you to get that, to kind of put that whole thing in context.
It is the most fantastic rational explanation for the Nephilim that I've ever encountered, and I'm absolutely buying this book. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Excellent, excellent. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Scott, you could take it. Oh, Scott, are you still there?
There, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, great lecture. Lots of notes as usual. Just a question. I like the fundamental. My theme lately is about Kant and what Philip was saying before about Francis Bacon. So the humanist view and the legacy of Thomas Aquinas that I think is picked up probably best by Schiller. and his aesthetical education, the letters on the aesthetical education of man. And just wondered if you'd read that, and because I thought that book had profound things to say about the psychology, the deep psychology of man, and how, and its spiritual connections, and how, what role of free will we have in crafting it, the notion of the beautiful souls.
Could you distill a synopsis for me? It sounds familiar, but I don't know if I'm familiar with that piece of work.
Okay, well, it's a series of letters with a German aristocrat on the failure of the French Revolution, and it evolves into, what are the nature is psychology? Why did the French Revolution fail, and what is the purpose even of a revolution? And what does this mean for humankind? And he gets into what it looks to me is, I mean, the first kind of inkling of a sympathetic. He mentions, concepts that are known today: sympathetic system, nervous system, parasympathetic, but not in those kind of terms, in scientific terms. And this interplay of will, he talks a lot about will, but impressions and various things. I mean, it's the latest translation I'm referring to is tribe. So
and that's August Comte, right? That's August Comte, right?
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's him as well.
See, because if I recall correctly, Auguste Comte did, rightly so, critique the French Revolution, and because the French Revolution was a bad development, and it seems to have been influenced by foreign elements too. There seem to have been British elements that had been involved in bringing that about. There were also Illuminist influences there, and all. Adam Weishaupt's Bavarian Illuminati had since ceased to exist as a cohesive organization, but his ideas had already seeded the revolutionary firmament. And if you want to know more about that, look into at Fire in the Minds of Men by former librarian of Congress, James Billington. His book lays that out really well. So he was very right in critiquing the French Revolution. The problem is that you find there the alternative suggested to be an early embryonic kind of technocracy. That's what's offered up as the alternative, which is not an alternative at all. And we're suffering right now from the effects of a technocracy. That's no question in my mind.
Well, this is, I think, what was predicted by Schiller, Friedrich Schiller, as a turning, and he devoted, 32 letters, which are, I mean, it's also kind of in older German. So the original writings are like, these are profound ideas in very difficult language.
Scott.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me just chime in here, just quick, in a simple way. Yeah, what Scott's referring to is, I've read those. Is he's referring, and it's worthwhile. Schiller's diagnostic of why the French Revolution failed, which was essentially, and it's profound, but he's diagnosing the schism of two cultures that was formed around the masses who were not permitted under the feudal system to develop their culture and their higher powers of reasoning. So there were a lot of raw, wild emotions untempered by moral reason. And then amongst the elites, there was a culture of detachment, of elitism, where there was a hypertrophied sort of intellect and no love. So the actual heart had been constricted, so there was just intellect without heart. And Schiller's point was, as an artist and a poet and a playwright, that the remedy for that type of problem that would always be used by the oligarchy would be through cultivating the powers of discovery. So encouraging people to work their conscience and their reasoning together in a dance, so that the people and the leadership together can recognize a higher law that unites everybody's interests together. Um, and unfortunately, the American Revolution came probably the closest to trying to bridge those two worlds, but then it got still a lot of too too many Hellfire Club forces were left unresolved, and and did their little revenge. But that's the thing, yeah. So it's Schiller's aesthetical letters that Scott's referring to, and I'll put a link because I think it's actually so relevant to this discussion. As well as Schiller's he did a psychological his only short story. He only wrote plays, but he did a short story, and Cynthia Chung did a deep dive into his one story called The Ghost Seer or The Apparitionist, featuring have you I guess you probably haven't encountered that one, Paul?
No, not yet. No.
I'll include it, but it's good because, especially with the discussion of the whole UFO and supernatural psyop, Schiller's situating a German prince who's like third in line to become made the head of one of a major Prussian state in during the 30 Years War. And this prince is a very well-intended guy, but sloppy thinking, very immature identity, and he goes for a vacation to Venice. And in Venice, he's been basically profiled and targeted by a very elaborate operation to psychologically break him down into a superstitious mess. And it's very sophisticated what Schiller weaves as far as the Venetian techniques of creating situations for high value targets that result in them turning into like corrupting them, getting them to spoil their money in gambling addiction, other bad vices, as well as creating like supernatural phenomenon that induce the guy to break free of reason and in order to become liberated. And then he's essentially by the end totally reconstructed, like deconstructed and then reconstructed as a complete psyop shell, who will then be sent back to Germany as his two, like his older brother and father now are dead. And he's all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, I have no idea why they died, but now he's going to go back and be the leader of that German or that Prussian state as a total shill of Venice, as an automaton. But this is what Schiller is doing to sort of help train the intelligentsia to understand how to navigate through these illusionist tricks, which again
Let
super
me
valuable for the current discussion. So I'll make a link to that in
yes.
the description box under this video for those who
Let,
want to like dive
let,
into
let,
that.
let me tell you why that text would be very interesting to me, because it would help place into context the individual that I mentioned during my talk, Paul Benowitz, and what happened to him. Paul Benowitz was very well-meaning. He was a patriotic man. Yeah, he's eccentric. He's got some goofy ideas about what he's picking up from Kirtland Air Force Base, but he's not a bad person, not in the least. And all. And then AFOSI and these deep state entities, such as the Aviary, get their hooks into them and cause a total divorce from reality. And it's very his story is very relevant right now. And I'll tell you why. Because, okay, we got these drones in the sky right now, and the drones are causing, this new buzz regarding UFOs. Well, back in 1985, when Benowitz became associated with Richard Doty, the AFOSI officer and aviary representative that I had brought up during my conversation. What happens is that Doty took Benowitz on a flight over this crash site of some kind of R&D, this advanced piece of R&D. And it was the remains were either an experimental F-117 stealth fighter, or it was a very early UAV, a very early unmanned aerial vehicle. And and he took him over this and told him, this is the site. This here, Arcaluta Mesa is the site of an exchange, a military exchange between Delta Force and the aliens, and he just lets him see it and lets his mind do the rest. And he sees what was either a UAV or a stealth fighter and says, that's an alien craft and all. So, and bring it all the way up to the present day. We got these UAV flying around. There's nothing extraterrestrial about UAV, but it's being floated now. That's what you're seeing and everything. But like, to me, Benowitz, it kind of mirrors the poor unfortunate soul that Schiller brought up. He really does. He seems, because the divorce from reality is facilitated by Doty and by others, by the AFOSI, by other alphabet soup agencies involved in this psyop against Benowitz. And what ends up happening and all, Benowitz ends up like fortifying his house with sandbags. He's convinced that aliens are coming through the walls and all, and are assailing him at night and all. He finally, his family just finally finds him. He's been chain smoking cigarettes and he won't leave the house, and they finally find him and in this state of nervous exhaustion, and place him in a psychiatric facility, in a ward with a nervous breakdown. And even long after this had all taken place, and even after he's out of the psych ward, he's talking to Doty. Doty felt guilty about what he did, justifiably so, and he told Benowitz, everything I told you was a lie. That was just disinformation. Benowitz's response was, you don't have to say that to me. I know that it was the truth. I know it was the truth. Benowitz went to his grave believing every word of it and all. So the Manchurian candidate is set on autopilot, and you can just and you don't have to hardly touch him anymore. He'll just run with it. Now, imagine the Benowitz case, but on a higher level, on the level of world leaders and all. And you have astrologers planted on them, like what Miles Copeland did with Bob Mandelstam when he was running the political action wing of the Central Intelligence Agency. He started the program called OHP, Occultism in High Places. And they plant these astrologers, and they plant these they plant these occultists among world leaders and all. And those occultists have to do is get the ball rolling. And all of a sudden, the world leader is going off, in that trajectory, and will land in the desired ends without much more manipulation necessary and everything. And by the way, that's Miles Copeland, who wrote The Game Player. He wrote about OHP in The Game Player. It's a hard book to find, but I would suggest that everybody read that. It's a bit tangential, but Miles Copeland was also very much involved in spreading spreading not just UFO BS, but the holy blood, holy grail of Michael Bagent and Lee and Lincoln BS and everything, because he told those same authors that while stationed in Beirut, they had found a copy of, I believe, the Book of Daniel or something, and took it up to the top of the building, and that it got blown away. And basically what he was suggesting to them is that there are actual manuscripts, ancient manuscripts out there of the Bible that actually undermine the Orthodox, both capital and lowercase o, interpretation of Scripture. And his son, who was the drummer to the Police, actually did an opera. I believe it was a rock opera, but it was an opera that was based on Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the novel by Michael Bagent and Lee and Lincoln and all that spreads all this wild nonsense that, oh, Christ didn't die. They gave him a pufferfish, like what they use in the Haitian, like what the Haitian voodoo doctors use and all, and he just fell asleep and he can't, then he went over to France and he sires with Mary Magdalene, the Merovingian bloodline, and on it goes, basically to concoct this idea that a lot of the oligarchical set over in Europe are the actual messianic bloodline, and it shouldn't be the Roman Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church. It should be these people like the Habsburgs that you should be following, and that sort of thing. He was also instrumental in that little meme, not just UFO disinformation, but that meme as well. So yeah, that's a bit tangential, but I just highly recommend. There's a whole swath of books that I'd like to recommend to people to read that they really should read to put the UFO.
Great.
Yeah,
So,
no.
Paul, can you send me a list of recommended reading? I'm buying a lot of stuff here, and I'll just include it in the description box under this video for people. I mean, you've whet a lot of appetites.
Yeah, and I was sorry. I slaughtered that title the first time we talked in that phone conversation about the book that shows Alan Dulles' involvement in the Adamski case and all. The book was actually called Condition Red and all. And now I've lost the friggin' author's name again. I will send these some of these titles along to you. But if you want it distilled down, not to toot my own horn or do a commercial or anything like that, we go on for about 300 pages in Invoking the Beyond about this, distilling it down and also sharing some primary documents that support the contention that I laid out here.
All right, Invoking the Beyond by the Collins brothers. That is the #1 thing to pick up and read as of this experience. I think that this should be watched and rewatched again. I mean, it's so important, I think, at this point to be aware that the oligarchy can only succeed in getting these psyops to work if we ourselves do not work our minds with rigor and go beyond what we expected of ourselves in normal circumstances when things seem to be perfectly stable and okay. No, that was actually normalized mediocrity and stupidity that we thought was normal. It wasn't. Being normal is actually going beyond what you thought you were capable of and making increasing arrays of discoveries over time. And as you do that, that mind muscle metaphysically gets stronger. Your ability of discerning a wind egg from a real thought that actually has substance behind it becomes better. That's what Socrates called the thoughts that are rooted in sophistry or fallacies of composition that have embedded within them unexamined false assumptions that build a structure of argumentation that might seem persuasive or look lovely and seductive, but actually has embedded in it, as he called it, a wind egg. It looks like an egg, but it's only wind. There's nothing in there that is solid, and that's different from real earned knowledge. So yeah, I think this is a really great way of just going to the mental gym. Thank you enormously. Again, check out the books. There's going to be a big reading list topped off with Phil and Paul's Invoking the Beyond. And I'm looking forward to future presentations by you guys. I mean, I feel like anything I throw at you, you could just draw out a whole composition. So
yeah, I'd be honored to come back. Absolutely. I'd be honored to come back.
Sweet.
There. And I apologize for parts where my presentation got garbled again, like I was getting dry throat and everything. But I hope that most of it was coherent and comprehensible, and that people got something that they could use out of this and everything. I think the most important thing to take away, if I had to give you anything to leave with, the whole UFO deception and where it stands right now with that is actually gives us reasons to be optimistic. We're living in the age of the failing narrative. Nothing they have tried is working. Nobody believes them anymore. And all the climate change narrative strains credulity. The evil Chinese and evil Russians narrative strains credulity. People aren't buying it anymore. And all. So what are they left with? They're left with trying to convince us that there's little green men that are invading our airspace. And all. That's what they started with last year. That's what they're with the balloon scandal and all. And what they're doing right now is they're seeding us with the idea that of an aerial menace and all. And it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You know, I know that you've spoken with Alex Trainer, and you've published some of Alex Trainer's stuff. He's an analyst that I really respect. And what's something that really nags him? People giving these oligarchs too much credit and thinking them smarter than they really are. And all much of their intellectual moxie went away in 2017. They lost David Rockefeller. They lost Zbigniew Brzezinski, and all. You know, they inevitably succumbed to mortality. And who did they just lose again? Just recently, and all. Henry Kissinger, and all. They're all out of brains. All they're left with is pampered elites that never had to perform a day in their life, and then it comes out in their plans. Their plans are more sloppy, and they're falling apart a lot easier. And so this is an indication. The fact that they're turning into something so far-fetched as aliens, and all to try to sustain their control, and all is proof that their time is almost over.
Well said. No, that's great, Paul. Thank you, man. All right, guys. So we'll have a follow-up presentation next week. We're going to continue pulling on this thread of cutting through psyops. So this has been good, and look forward to meeting up with everybody again next week, same time. Bye, y'all.